When we talk about the absolute heights of human achievement, there's always this underlying expectation, right?
Oh, definitely. Like a romanticized ideal.
Exactly. This romanticized ideal of the solitary individual genius.
Right.
I mean, you look at a towering skyscraper piercing the clouds, and you think about those perfect, precise blueprints.
Right.
And your natural instinct is to point at it and say, one brilliant mind sat in a quiet room and designed that.
It's a very comforting narrative, I think. We absolutely love to think of ourselves as independent operators.
Yeah, these fiercely autonomous individuals navigating the world based on our own unshakable logic.
But it is a deeply ingrained myth, especially in modern Western culture. We cling to this image. I mean, think of the isolated detective solving the unsolvable case.
Or like the rogue innovator working out of a dusty garage.
Right, exactly. It feeds our ego to believe we are immune to the forces around us. But the moment you step out of that romanticized isolation and step into the actual observable world of sociology and group dynamics,
the blueprint just gets completely torn to shreds, doesn't it?
Oh, completely. We're looking at a behavioral landscape that is infinitely messier. It's highly reactive, profoundly interconnected. And the uncomfortable truth is, well, we are fundamentally a herd species.
A herd species. It's the absolute definition of a sociological tug of war.
Yeah.
Because we are constantly caught in this invisible battle between this desperate, undeniably primal desire to just fit in and be safe and our deep-seated urge to stand out and be unique.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It really is. And for you listening right now, whether you are trying to navigate the unspoken rules of your office politics, or just trying to figure out your friend group dynamics, or even if you just want to know why you suddenly feel the urge to buy something you don't even need, this deep dive is your shortcut to making sense of it all.
It really is the ultimate cheat code.
We are unpacking an incredibly rich linguistic map today. The source material is this fascinating exploration called the social herd, idioms of conformity and rebellion. And our mission is to decode how the English language perfectly captures these group dynamics.
And language is it's the ultimate fossil record of human psychology, It doesn't just passively describe what we do. It actually reveals how our ancestors process the really complex, often frightening reality of living in groups.
Because we aren't just talking about simple phrases like, he copies people or whatever.
Right, no. The English language borrows these highly evocative, almost cinematic pieces of imagery from fields that seem completely unrelated to human behavior.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to look at political circuses from the 1800s, the physics of acoustic engineering, nautical survival tactics, and even animal genetics.
It's going to be a wild ride.
So let's start by looking at what happens when the herd moves as one massive, unstoppable unit. We have to talk about the spectacle of the crowd. Because conformity isn't always this dark, oppressive, forced thing, right? Sometimes it's totally voluntary.
Oh, it can be overwhelmingly enthusiastic and frankly, entirely devoid of any foundational logic.
Right. So what is this phenomenon?
Well, this is mass adoption, which is best encapsulated by the phrase, jumping on the bandwagon.
Okay, jumping on the bandwagon.
In a sociological context, this means adopting a popular trend or suddenly agreeing with a widespread idea simply because everyone else is doing it.
You just completely abandon your own independent principles.
Exactly. And not out of malice, but out of a sudden overwhelming urge to join the momentum of the crowd.
I feel like the perfect modern example of this is the automotive industry right now with electric vehicles.
Oh, that's a great example from the source material.
Because for decades, the established legacy car manufacturers wanted absolutely nothing to do with electric cars. I mean, it didn't fit their business model. It didn't fit their mechanical principles. They actively dismissed it.
They fought it tooth and nail.
But then it suddenly became fashionable. The cultural momentum shifted. And virtually overnight, every single major manufacturer abandoned their decades-old principles, completely pivoted, and started producing them.
And they adopted the trend not because they suddenly had this deep, moral, philosophical awakening about the internal combustion engine.
Right. They weren't suddenly saving the planet out of the goodness of their hearts.
No, they did it because the market dictated that it was the popular thing to do. The momentum had just become too large to ignore. I mean, if they stayed off the wagon, they risked being left behind entirely.
Which brings me to the physical origins of this phrase, because I really want to dig into this. It makes the psychology so much clearer.
The origins are fascinating.
Because jumping on the bandwagon isn't just like a generic metaphor about a wooden cart. This comes directly from 19th century American politics.
Specifically around the 1840s, right?
Exactly, the 1840s. Politicians back then figured out a literal physical hack for gathering crowds in an era way before mass media. They would hire actual literal circus bands.
I love that detail.
They would put these massive brass bands on enormous, highly decorated horse-drawn wagons, and they would parade them through the dirt streets of these towns, playing incredibly loud, infectious music.
It was literally a wagon for a bandwagon.
Yes. And the sheer spectacle of it.
Yeah.
I mean, the massive horses, the booming brass instruments, the colorful flags, it created this overwhelming sensory experience.
And the citizens in the 1840s would literally run out of their houses and jump onto the wagon or follow immediately behind it just to be part of the excitement.
But wait, I want to pause here and challenge the way we usually think about this, because we often use jumping on the bandwagon as an insult today, right?
Yeah, we totally do.
We imply that people are being mindless sheep. But if you think about those citizens in the 1840s, they were running out to hear loud, joyful music in what was probably an otherwise quiet, difficult life.
That's very true.
So doesn't this suggest that giving in to the crowd isn't always this malicious act of intellectual weakness? Like, maybe it's just a basic, beautiful human vulnerability to share joy.
You know, that is a highly empathetic way to look at it, and it really strikes at the core of why this type of conformity is so powerful. It highlights the immense psychological gravity of a shared emotional experience.
Yeah.
The abandonment of logic happens precisely because the visceral energy of the crowd, the loud music, the massive wagon, it completely overrides the slower, more deliberate process of critical thinking.
So the people jumping on that wagon weren't necessarily doing it to conform to a specific political ideology.
No, they might not have even known the name of the politician who funded the parade. They were just surrendering to a spectacle.
It's the sensory overload. You hear the trumpets blaring, you feel the vibration of the wagon wheels on the dirt street, you see hundreds of your neighbors laughing and cheering. You want to be part of that.
Of course you do.
Because standing on the sidewalk with your arms crossed, stubbornly holding on to your independent principles, it just feels isolating and cold.
Which perfectly describes how easily our independence is surrendered, doesn't it? The biological urge to share and collective excitement is profound.
But there is a danger there, right?
There's an inherent danger, yes. And this is where the automotive example connects back perfectly. Once you surrender to the spectacle and jump on the wagon, you are now moving in whatever direction the driver of that wagon decides to go.
Oh, wow.
You have traded your personal agency for the thrill of the ride.
You're no longer navigating, you are just a passenger.
Exactly.
And I guess that makes sense for a fleeting moment. A parade passes by, you jump on, you have fun for an hour, you jump off, and you go back to your life.
Right. It's temporary.
But that fleeting excitement doesn't cover the entirety of human conformity, because there's a much more exhausting, permanent type of assimilation that happens not during a parade, but right in our own quiet suburban neighborhoods.
So we are moving from the thrill of the spectacle to the insecurity of status.
Yes.
This is material conformity.
If the bandwagon is about chasing excitement and shared joy, this next one is purely about chasing status. And honestly, it sounds absolutely miserable.
It really is. The idiom here is keeping up with the Joneses.
Right. So in sociological terms, how is this defined?
Well, it's defined as the exhausting, materialistic race to match the lifestyle, the wealth, and the perceived social status of your peers.
And the driver here is totally different from the bandwagon.
Entirely different. There is zero shared joy here. It is driven almost entirely by jealousy, inadequacy, and a profound insecurity about one's place in the social hierarchy.
The example from the source material that always sticks in my head for this is so painful. Imagine a family going into massive debt to buy a $50,000 recreational vehicle, a massive RV.
Right.
Despite the fact that they actively hate camping, they loathe the outdoors.
But they buy it anyway.
They buy it anyway, and they just let it sit in their driveway purely because the neighbors across the street bought one.
That scenario perfectly encapsulates the hollow tragedy of material conformity. I mean, you are sacrificing your own financial security and completely ignoring your own personal preferences purely to project an image of equality to a neighbor.
And the fascinating thing about the Joneses is who they actually represent historically.
Oh, the comic strip.
Yeah, the origin of this idiom comes from a 1913 American comic strip created by Arthur Momand. It was literally called Keeping Up with the Joneses.
And what's brilliant about that comic is that the Joneses themselves were almost never actually seen in the panels.
Yes, they weren't like spectacular billionaires or royalty. They represented the generic upper middle class neighbors who just seemingly always possessed a slightly nicer car, a slightly bigger house, and slightly better clothes.
They are the ultimate phantom benchmark. They represent a standard of normalcy that is deliberately designed to always be just slightly out of reach.
I was trying to picture what this feels like physically, and the best analogy I could come up with is that it feels exactly like being on a treadmill. But imagine you are on a treadmill, and the speed dial isn't controlled by you.
Oh, that's good.
The speed dial is completely controlled by the person running on the treadmill next to you.
That is a terrifying but deeply accurate visualization of the sociological mechanism at play here.
Right. Because you are jogging at a perfectly comfortable pace. You are happy with your life. But then the neighbor, the Joneses, buys a new luxury car. They just sped up their treadmill.
So you have to speed yours up.
Exactly. Out of pure panicked insecurity, you reach over and speed up your own treadmill to match them. But you don't even want to run that fast. You hate camping. You don't care about luxury cars.
But you buy the $50,000 RV anyway, just so you don't look like you're falling behind.
And the inevitable biological result of running at a speed you didn't choose is absolute crushing exhaustion.
Well, the treadmill analogy highlights the perpetual nature of this trap, because the moment you match their speed, the Joneses will inevitably upgrade something else.
They always do.
They'll remodel their kitchen, or they'll take an exotic vacation. The speed increases again. This behavior is deeply rooted in social status, and it lacks the temporary joy of the bandwagon. Material conformity is entirely a defensive maneuver.
It is pure defense.
Yeah.
You're just throwing money at a wall, hoping it protects you from the judgment of the tribe.
You're going into massive debt, not to feel good, but purely to prove equality to a constantly shifting generic standard. It's the human herd operating out of a primal fear of being perceived as lesser.
Which, historically speaking, meant being cast out of the tribe entirely. Okay?
Exactly. It was a matter of survival in ancient times.
But let's look at the long-term consequences of this in modern society. Because if you spend your entire adult life terrified of falling behind the Joneses, and you curate your house, your car, and your hobbies to perfectly match this generic standard, you eventually end up surrounding yourself only with people who look, spend, and act exactly like you.
Yes. Your entire physical environment becomes a mirror.
And the source material points out a really dangerous pattern here.
It creates a highly dangerous psychological phenomenon. When material conformity completely dictates your physical environment and your social circle, it inevitably evolves into intellectual conformity.
We cross the line from matching someone's car to literally matching their reality.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the echo chamber. Now, for you listening, you have undoubtedly heard this phrase a million times. It's usually a complaint about the internet or modern politics.
It's everywhere these days.
Sociologically, how is it defined?
An echo chamber is an environment like a heavily curated social media algorithm or a highly biased television news network where a person only encounters information that perfectly reflects and reinforces their already existing beliefs.
So the modern example is stark.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, very common.
Very common. It's a person who intentionally only reads articles written by authors from their own political party and only watches commentators who validate their pre-existing worldview.
And just to be clear for the listeners, the source material discusses this in terms of both left-wing and right-wing spaces. It happens everywhere.
Yeah.
We aren't endorsing any of those viewpoints, just observing the mechanism.
Absolutely. The mechanism itself is politically neutral. It affects everyone.
But if we step away from the digital algorithms for a second, the origin story of this phrase is a fascinating lesson in physics. It doesn't come from tech at all.
No, it comes from acoustic engineering. And the acoustic metaphor is arguably the most brilliant mapping of physical science to human behavior we have in this entire deep dive.
Okay, unpack that for us.
An echo chamber, in its literal physical sense, is a closed, hollow room constructed of highly reflective, hard surfaces.
Like concrete walls.
Right. When a sound is made inside this room, the sound waves bounce off the walls, intersecting and amplifying the original sound, repeating it endlessly.
Right, it just keeps bouncing back and forth.
But the most crucial architectural feature of this room is that it is totally sealed. Absolutely no outside noise can get in.
Let me stop you there because the mechanics of this are kind of blowing my mind a bit. The acoustic metaphor specifically highlights how the sound is physically amplified by the bouncing waves.
Yeah.
Does this imply that the sociological echo chamber doesn't just isolate our opinions, but actually tricks our brains into believing our opinions are significantly louder and more universally accepted than they actually are?
That is the insidious brilliance of the metaphor. It's not merely a mechanism of isolation, it's a mechanism of profound distortion.
Wow.
This environment systematically dismantles critical thinking because no outside noise, meaning opposing viewpoints, contradictory facts, or even basic nuance can penetrate those walls. The individual inside is trapped in a completely fabricated reality.
So if I stand in a literal physical hollow room and I yell out, "Apples are the absolute best fruit," the sound waves bounce off the concrete walls and hit my ears 10 times over. Apples are the best. Apples are the best. Apples are the best.
Precisely.
If I don't understand the physics of the room I am in, I might walk out of there genuinely believing that a crowd of 10 different people just passionately agreed with me. But in reality, it was literally just my own voice, weaponized against my own perception.
You begin to mistake the echo of your own isolated voice for a massive societal consensus.
That is so wild to think about.
When algorithms curate your newsfeed so you only see articles that align with your party, you aren't just missing the other side of the argument, you are being actively, continuously conditioned to believe that the other side barely exists at all.
Or that they're just a tiny fringe minority of irrational actors.
Exactly. The only thing you hear is the deafening roar of your own side's talking points, amplified by the invisible walls of the algorithm.
It's terrifying. But honestly, I also understand why we do it, because it feels so unbelievably cozy.
It's very comforting.
Think about the other forms of conformity we've discussed so far. The bandwagon is chaotic and loud. Keeping up with the Joneses is financially and physically exhausting.
Okay.
But the echo chamber...
The echo chamber feels like a warm blanket.
Exactly. You never have to experience the friction of being wrong. Every single article you click, every video you watch, just leans in and tells you how incredibly smart, moral, and correct you already are.
Which is exactly why critical thinking dies in that room. Critical thinking fundamentally requires friction.
It requires discomfort.
It requires the discomfort of encountering outside noise and having to defend, adjust, or abandon your position. In the echo chamber, you are conforming to an intellectual standard without ever realizing you're doing it, because the walls of the room are completely invisible to you.
You feel like a lone genius, completely unaware that you are just a sheep in a very tightly sealed pen.
Exactly.
Well, up to this point in our deep dive, there has been a common thread. All of this conformity has been a choice.
A subconscious choice? Maybe, but still a choice.
Right. You choose to run out into the street and chase the circus excitement. You choose to walk into the dealership and buy the massive RV. You choose to click the comfortable news links and stay in the hollow room.
But the dynamic shifts dramatically now.
Right. What happens when conformity isn't a choice you make for comfort, but a mandate you follow for actual literal survival?
We leave the realm of voluntary assimilation and enter the rigid structure of enforced conformity. And the idiom that captures this perfectly is toe the line.
Toe the line. Okay, let's define this one. It's defined as strictly conforming to the rules, policies, or standards of a group or an authority figure.
You behave exactly as you are told.
You follow the doctrine perfectly, even if you secretly, fundamentally disagree with it.
The classic example provided in the source is a young, idealistic politician. Imagine they get elected on a platform of radical system-changing ideas.
Right, they want to change the world.
But they quickly realize that to get any funding or to get assigned to any powerful committees, they have to completely abandon those ideas and conform strictly to the established party line.
It represents the ultimate pragmatic compromise of the human spirit.
It really does.
The imagery behind this one is so physically intense, too. The origin comes from strict military discipline and old athletic traditions.
Yeah, picture the parade ground.
Exactly. Imagine a platoon of soldiers standing at attention on a parade ground, or runners lining up for a high-stakes race. A commanding officer orders them to step up and place the very tips of their toes exactly on a straight, painted line on the ground.
You cannot place your foot 1 inch forward.
You cannot place your foot 1 inch backward.
It is a demand for absolute, perfect adherence to a visible, undeniable boundary.
I really want you listening to think about the physical tension required to actually do that. If you've ever had to stand perfectly still with your toes on a mark, staring straight ahead, you know what I mean?
It's not a relaxed posture at all.
No. Think about the muscles in your calves burning. Think about the rigidity in your spine. Unlike the cozy, relaxed posture you have while sitting in your echo chamber, towing the line requires painful, uncomfortable physical discipline.
It's forced compliance.
The metaphor inherently implies that your natural instinct is to step forward, but you are actively, forcefully holding yourself back.
The physical tension of the metaphor perfectly translates to the psychological toll of enforced conformity. If we look at how this plays out in corporate America or in deep political structures, that burning in the calves you described, that is the internal moral friction of the individual.
Oh, that's a great way to put it. Moral friction.
To survive in a highly structured, strict corporation, you have to follow their operational rules perfectly, regardless of your personal ethics or your innovative ideas.
You literally cannot step 1 inch forward with a new, radical idea that might upset the boss. And you cannot step 1 inch backward to question an outdated, inefficient policy.
You have to stand perfectly still and suppress your natural instincts.
Which brings us to the most painful compromise required by the human herd. Because that young politician we mentioned, they have radical ideas that might actually solve massive systemic issues.
But the structure of the herd, the machinery of the institution, demands uniformity above all else. To be accepted by the group, to acquire the resources necessary to survive in that ecosystem, personal identity and innovation must be sacrificed on the altar of compliance.
You essentially have to suppress your own nature just to be allowed to stay in the room. You swallow your pride, you lock your knees, and you toe the line.
It's a survival tactic.
But thankfully, for the progress of the human race, history isn't just a long, boring line of people standing perfectly still.
No, it certainly isn't.
The linguistic map shifts here because society is actually driven forward by the people who completely, stubbornly refuse to toe that line.
We pivot now from the vocabulary of the herd to the vocabulary of individual identity and rebellion. We are looking at the outcasts.
The people who cause the friction. And the language gives us 2 very specific, highly distinct types of outcasts. Let's look at the first one, the black sheep. I am absolutely obsessed with the historical origin of this one.
It's a metaphor grounded in the brutal realities of ancient commerce and biology.
Yeah, it comes directly from genetics and agricultural economics.
Okay.
So, in a massive flock of sheep, white wool is the genetic standard, right?
Yes.
And historically, white wool was incredibly valuable economically because it is a blank canvas. White wool can be dyed any color the farmer wants, red, blue, green, to meet the demands of the market.
It's adaptable, it's uniform.
But every so often, a genetic anomaly occurs, and a sheep is born with pitch black wool.
And because of that undeniable genetic reality, it stands out immediately against the sea of white. It completely disrupts the visual uniformity of the flock.
But there's an economic downside too, historically.
More importantly, historically speaking, its wool was considered vastly less valuable, sometimes completely worthless to merchants because black wool cannot take on any dye. It can only ever be black.
It stubbornly remains its true color. It just can't be changed.
Exactly.
So when we apply this to human group dynamics, a black sheep is defined as a family or group member who behaves fundamentally differently or holds deeply unconventional beliefs compared to the rest of their circle.
The classic example is a family full of generational, buttoned-up conservative bankers and lawyers.
Right, the white wool.
And one child decides they're going to be a traveling street musician. They are often considered a disgrace or a disappointment by the traditionalists, but sometimes they wear that title proudly as an eccentric badge of honor.
They stand out, and just like the wool, they cannot be dyed or manipulated to match the family's corporate standard.
They're just fundamentally different.
Now, I want to contrast that with the second type of outcast the language provides, a lone wolf.
This one is fascinating.
The origin here moves from agricultural genetics to wild animal biology. Wolves are apex predators, but they are fundamentally pack animals. They survive, hunt, and raise their young in highly structured, deeply hierarchical social groups.
The social structure of the pack is the single most important element of a wolf's survival in harsh climates.
But occasionally, a specific wolf will voluntarily leave that structure, or in some cases, they challenge the alpha and are aggressively driven out.
Either way, the result is the same.
Right. They end up having to survive, hunt, and endure the brutal wilderness completely alone without the safety net of the pack.
So in human terms, a lone wolf is a highly independent, fiercely self-reliant person who aggressively prefers their own company.
They insist on solving complex problems without any group interference.
It's the classic movie trope of the brilliant, grizzled detective who throws their badge on the desk and refuses to take a partner.
Yes. So we have 2 very distinct metaphors for independence, derived from 2 very different interactions with nature. I want to draw a very clear line between these 2 concepts for you listening. because the contrast is incredibly beautiful once you see it.
It really highlights two different types of rebellion.
Think about the physical origins. The black sheep is an outcast by nature. It is a genetic anomaly. The sheep cannot help that its wool is black.
It didn't wake up one morning and decide to be different.
Exactly. It can't help that it is biologically incapable of taking the dye of the family's expectations. It just is different.
It's an inherent, unchangeable trait. Their rebellion is simply existing as they were made.
But the lone wolf is an outcast by choice, or at the very least by a behavioral decision. It is the physical, active act of looking at the highly structured social group and deciding to leave its safety to face the wilderness alone.
It is nature versus nurture, the genetic anomaly versus the behavioral choice. I think that is a fantastic distinction.
Really frames it well.
Synthesizing these two idioms provides a profound tool for self-reflection. Because society is constantly operating like that historical wool merchant, it is constantly trying to dye us to fit the current market standard. The banking family desperately wants to dye the street musician to look like a corporate lawyer so they fit in at country club dinners.
But the black sheep is physically incapable of taking the dye. Their identity is set in their bones. If you dye black wool, it just looks like a muddy mess.
Precisely. The lone wolf, on the other hand, operates from a place of calculated assessment. They look at the structure of the pack, the exhausting treadmill of the Joneses, the stifling air of the echo chamber, the painful requirement to toe the line, and they simply reject the premise entirely.
They just walk away.
They trust their own individual survival skills, their own intellect in the cold wilderness, more than they value the artificial warmth and safety of the group's structure.
They basically say, I would literally rather hunt for scraps alone in the snow than take orders from an alpha.
Which, let's be honest, sounds very romantic. We love the lone wolf in movies.
We really do. But here is the fascinating scenario we need to explore based on the source material. What happens when you take a black sheep or a fiercely independent lone wolf and you force them to operate inside a normal, highly structured group?
Like what happens when the lone wolf has to get a corporate job?
Exactly. What happens then?
Well, they generate massive immediate friction. Because their very presence, their fundamental refusal to conform to the unwritten rules of the herd, threatens the stability of everyone else.
Which brings us to the physics of resistance. How do we describe disrupting the group? The idiom here is rock the boat.
Rock the boat.
This is defined as doing or saying something that disrupts the harmony, the peace, or the comfortable routine of a group. You challenge the status quo, and to the group, you aren't being innovative, you are just causing unnecessary trouble.
The modern workplace example from the source is almost universally relatable.
Oh yeah, everyone has seen this.
Imagine a deeply entrenched office team that has been doing things the exact same way for 10 years. A new manager, perhaps our lone wolf, comes in and realizes the system is incredibly inefficient.
So they immediately start changing all the schedules, updating the software, demanding new protocols.
And the team hates them instantly.
Instantly. But to understand why the hatred is so visceral, we have to look at the origin story. It's a vivid nautical metaphor.
Let's hear it.
Picture a tiny, fragile wooden rowboat floating on a deep, dark lake. Inside this small boat, 5 people are sitting. As long as everyone sits perfectly still, keeps their weight evenly distributed, and rows in unison, they glide safely over the water.
The center of gravity is meticulously maintained through collective stillness.
Exactly. But if one person, our lone wolf new manager, decides they want to see what's over the horizon, and they suddenly stand up, start jumping around, or aggressively try to change the direction of the boat, the physics of the small craft change instantly.
The boat tips violently from side to side. Water starts splashing over the edges.
By trying to change direction, they are physically threatening to capsize the fragile wooden boat and throw everyone into the freezing water.
This physical metaphor is incredibly revealing about society's deep-seated anxiety regarding nonconformity.
I want to really emphasize this for you listening because it completely changes how you view office politics. Think about how the group views its own peace. Society views its comfortable routine as a fragile wooden boat.
It's all about perceived safety.
To the 4 people sitting perfectly still, terrified of the dark water, the one independent thinker who stands up is never viewed as a visionary hero. They are viewed as a direct physical threat to their immediate survival.
It perfectly explains why nonconformists face such intense, often irrational resentment in everyday life. The herd prioritizes immediate harmony, comfort, and safety over long-term innovation or individual expression.
Because if the boat capsizes, everyone gets wet. I mean, even if the person standing up is pointing ahead and screaming, "Hey, we're rowing directly toward a massive waterfall, we have to turn around."
The group doesn't care about the waterfall.
No. The group's immediate biological reaction is sheer panic about the boat tipping right now. The anxiety of the immediate disruption completely outweighs the logical benefit of the new direction.
The collective mindset is fiercely protective of the status quo. The group thinks, we were fine before you got here. We were dry. Sit down, shut up, and toe the line, or you are going to drown us all. It frames independent thought not as a liberating force, but as a dangerous, selfish liability to the collective survival of the tribe.
So if rocking the boat is about the intense, localized friction of disrupting a small group like 5 terrified people in a rowboat or a single stubborn office team, our linguistic map leaves us with one final, ultimate idiom.
The apex of the sociological conflict?
Right. This one is reserved for those rare individuals who decide to take on the momentum of the entire world.
This is the exhaustion of supreme rebellion.
The phrase is swim against the tide. It is defined as bravely and exhaustingly opposing the prevailing popular opinion, the dominant culture, or the massive global trend.
It means fighting for what you believe is right and maintaining your individual principles, even when it feels like the entire human race is moving in the exact opposite direction.
The contrast provided in the source material for this is excellent. Imagine an independent clothing designer who insists on creating expensive, highly durable, lasting clothes using ethical labor, while trying to survive in a global fashion industry that has become completely psychopathically obsessed with cheap, disposable, ultra-fast fashion.
They aren't just bucking a trend, they are fighting the entire economic structure of their industry.
Yes, and the origin story of this phrase explains the immense, almost incomprehensible scale of this task. It's a metaphor based in physical oceanography. The tide isn't just a wave at the beach.
Far from it.
It is the massive, unstoppable gravitational movement of millions and millions of gallons of ocean water, pulled by the immense gravity of the moon itself.
The scale is quite literally planetary. It is a force of nature that cannot be reasoned with or stopped.
Exactly. If you were in the ocean and you choose to swim with the tide, it's completely effortless experience. You barely have to kick your legs.
Yeah.
Millions of gallons of water literally carry you along.
Like jumping on the bandwagon?
Yes. But if you decide to turn your body around, face the incoming water, and try to swim against the tide, it requires agonizing, relentless physical exertion. You are fighting the entire ocean. And, as the metaphor implies, if you run out of energy, you risk drowning.
It's a life or death struggle.
So let me ask you this. Why does our language frame the ultimate act of rebellion, the peak of human individuality, as something so incredibly agonizing?
Yeah.
Is the language trying to warn us not to try it?
You know, that is a profound way to look at it. I don't believe it's necessarily a warning to stop us, but rather a perfectly accurate, brutally honest sociological map of the human condition. It acknowledges the literal physics of social pressure.
The physics of social pressure, the idea that culture has a gravitational weight to it.
Yes. Think back to the very beginning of this deep dive. Jumping on the bandwagon is effortless. The circus music is loud, the crowd is cheering, the political tide is pulling you along.
The water carries you.
Exactly. You don't have to engage your brain, you just float along with the herd.
It's the path of least resistance. You don't even have to swim.
But maintaining a truly independent identity, being that ethical clothing designer when the whole world is demanding cheap garbage, requires acknowledging the massive, crushing weight of the culture pushing against you.
Millions of gallons of cultural expectation.
Economic pressure and peer judgment. To swim against that isn't just about having a quirky, different opinion. It requires immense bravery, deep conviction, and exhausting, continuous, daily exertion to fight the gravity of the herd.
Because you aren't just fighting the 5 people in the rowboat anymore. You are fighting the gravitational pull of society itself. Every time you open your mouth to defend your business model, another wave hits you in the face.
It's exhausting just visualizing it.
It really is, but at the same time, it is incredibly heroic. It elevates the lone wolf from someone who just hates taking orders to someone who is willing to endure immense pain to maintain their integrity.
It is the ultimate expression of the human spirit refusing to be dyed. Refusing the deceptive ease of the current to forge a deliberate path, fully accepting the monumental effort required to survive the journey.
What an absolute journey this has been through the English language.
Yeah, truly.
I mean, we started with the mindless, loud, sensory excitement of jumping on circus bandwagons with the crowd.
We ran ourselves ragged on the exhausting, unwinnable treadmill of keeping up with the Joneses.
We locked ourselves inside the cozy, reality-distorting, physically sealed rooms of our digital echo chambers.
We felt the burning physical tension of locking our knees and towing the painted line of corporate and political survival.
We analyzed the genetic, unchangeable anomaly of the black sheep and compared it to the deliberate behavioral wilderness choice of the lone wolf.
We felt the sheer panic and anxiety of rocking the fragile wooden boat of office politics.
And finally, we arrived at the solitary, agonizing planetary bravery of swimming against the gravitational tide of the ocean.
If you take nothing else away from this, you listening now possess the ultimate vocabulary to decode the psychological fabric of the world around you.
You really do.
The next time you see a massive trend take off out of nowhere, you understand the sensory mechanics of the bandwagon. When you see a brilliant employee marginalized and pushed out at work, you can instantly identify the black sheep dynamic terrifying the rowboat.
This language is a literal map of the endless war between peer pressure and individuality.
It truly is a shortcut to being a deeply well-informed observer of human nature.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought. Something for you to genuinely mull over today as you commute, or sit at your desk, or navigate your own social circles.
Okay, let's hear it.
Think back to the brutal agricultural origins of the black sheep we discussed earlier. Look closely at the spaces in your own life right now. Are you allowing society to dye your wool just so you can blend in perfectly and safely with the flock?
It is perhaps the most important question a person can ask themselves about their own life.
And if you realize that is it finally time to embrace your natural colors, jump off the comfortable bandwagon, and start doing the exhausting, beautiful work of swimming against the tide?
What a thought to end on.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.
Until next time, stay curious.
Keep analyzing the world around you. Have a great day.
I want you to picture a room. Just, visualize a beautifully appointed, glass-walled corporate boardroom.
Right, way up high, overlooking a city skyline.
Exactly. And sitting around that massive mahogany table are, let's say, 12 individuals.
The best of the best.
Right. If you look at their resumes, you're looking at Ivy League degrees, decades of high-stakes experience, undeniably brilliant, highly trained minds.
People who are, by all accounts, analytical geniuses.
Yeah. These are people capable of calculating complex risk or orchestrating international logistics, analyzing deep market trends. And yet, if you observe them for long enough,
Oh, yeah.
you will eventually watch this assembly of geniuses collectively decide to do something so undeniably, or just catastrophically stupid that it defies all logic.
It really is a terrifying spectacle.
Yeah.
I mean, you're watching the individual human brain, which is arguably the most complex processing engine in the known universe, just quietly power down.
Just switch right off.
Yeah. The critical thinking circuits just shut off, and an entirely different, massive, invisible entity takes the wheel.
Exactly. And if you've ever been in a room like that, or, if you've watched a seemingly rational community online suddenly pivot into absolute madness, you know exactly what we're talking about today.
You felt it.
You felt it, yeah. Because in this deep dive, we are exploring the darkest architecture of human society.
The terrifying reality of group dynamics.
Right, but we're not just looking at dry sociological data here. We are unpacking what is essentially a linguistic masterclass.
Which is the best part, honestly.
It is. We are going to examine the intensely evocative, highly psychological vocabulary that native English speakers use to describe the whole life cycle of conformity.
Right, from start to finish.
Yeah. We're tracking the journey from the moment you surrender to the crowd all the way to the moment that same crowd inevitably decides to exile you.
And, I have to say, this is an incredibly vital toolkit to have. We aren't doing this just to memorize idioms.
No, not at all.
We're doing this because understanding the mechanics of the crowd is, it's a fundamental survival mechanism.
Oh, completely.
Because think about the tension we all feel in our lives, right?
Yeah.
We have this deep romanticized notion of the lone wolf.
Right, the rebel.
Yeah, we make movies about the brave rebel who stands against the tide.
Yeah.
The one person who points out that the emperor has no clothes.
But in reality,
sociologically speaking, true lone wolves are incredibly rare. And usually, honestly, they don't survive very long.
Because standing alone is just exhausting. I mean, the friction is unbearable.
Precisely. The vast majority of human beings, no matter how fiercely independent they claim to be, will eventually surrender to the group.
It's just human nature.
It is.
Yeah.
And the moment a group reaches a certain critical mass, a phase transition occurs.
Oh, I love that term, phase transition.
Right. Because it's no longer just a collection of 50 or 1,000 independent minds. It metabolizes.
Wow.
It becomes a single, unstoppable organism with its own singular will. And, it develops incredibly brutal, systematic mechanisms to punish anyone who disobeys.
Well, I want to dive straight into that phase transition, actually, because it happens so fast.
It really does.
It's that initial moment of surrender where instinct just entirely overrides logic. So let's talk about the first concept in our notes today, which is herd mentality or mob mentality.
Yeah, and what's vital to understand here is that herd mentality isn't just like a metaphor designed by a poet.
Right.
It is a direct, unfiltered biological diagnosis.
Well,
We are drawing a straight line from human behavior in a boardroom or on a trading floor right back to a massive flock of sheep or a herd of wildebeests on the African savanna.
see, I don't know if I completely buy that we are that primal, though. Like, are you saying a hedge fund manager operates on the exact same neurological hardware as a wildebeest?
In a moment of
Yeah.
panic or, intense social absolutely.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Let's look at the mechanics of the herd. You have 10,000 wildebeests grazing quietly.
Okay.
One single animal on the far edge of the herd hears a twig snap. It gets spooked, its adrenaline spikes, and it starts sprinting. Now, what does the wildebeest standing next to it do?
Well, it just runs.
Right. But think about what it doesn't do. It doesn't stop. Scan the horizon,
Yeah.
calculate the wind direction, and ask, wait, why are we running?
Right, it doesn't say, did you actually see a lion, or was it just a bird?
Exactly. Because evolution has taught that animal that if it waits to gather data, it dies.
Wow.
So it entirely bypasses the prefrontal cortex, the slow, logical, reasoning part of the brain. The amygdala just takes over, the panic transfers like an electrical current, and within 3 seconds, 10,000 massive animals are stampeding blindly in one direction.
Okay, so the individual wildebeest literally surrenders its central nervous system to the collective. Like, the movement of the herd becomes its brain.
Exactly. Now, map that onto human sociology.
Okay.
The exact same neurological override happens. People abandon their independent, critical thinking to blindly adopt the behaviors, the panic, or the opinions of the crowd.
I guess the most obvious parallel for us is a financial bubble.
Oh, absolutely. Textbook.
I think back to the dot-com bubble or, the various crypto explosions we've seen recently. You have millions of people pouring their entire life savings, their kids' college funds, into companies or digital assets that have zero revenue.
No product.
No product and absolutely no logical path to profitability.
And if you ask those people individually, like in a vacuum, would you give a stranger $100,000 for a business that makes nothing?
Their logical brain would say, of course not. That's insane.
Right. But the herd is running.
That's the terrifying part. Your rational brain is screaming at you that this is a house of cards. But your primal brain is looking around.
You see your neighbor buying a new car.
Yeah. You see your brother-in-law paying off his mortgage. The herd is stampeding toward this financial asset.
And the sheer biological terror of being left behind, of being isolated from the wealth and security of the group, it just overrides your logic.
It's FOMO, but on a biological survival level.
Exactly. Evolution tells you that if you don't run with the herd, you will starve. So you click buy. You devolve into a blind follower, not because you believe in the asset, but because the biological pressure to conform is heavier than the weight of your own intelligence.
And we see the exact same architecture online, too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, social media algorithms are basically custom built to exploit herd mentality.
They thrive on it.
They thrive on simulating a stampede. You log on and the algorithm immediately shows you that 500,000 people are absolutely enraged about a specific headline or like a 10-second video clip.
And what happens to your brain in that moment?
You get angry too.
Right.
Before you even realize what you're doing, your heart rate elevates. You don't pause to read the full article. You don't check if the video was taken out of context.
Because the herd is moving.
Yeah, the algorithm has artificially manufactured the sound of 10,000 wildebeests running, and your instinct is to join the mob.
Because standing in front of an angry mob and saying, wait, let's look at the context.
That is socially suicidal.
Exactly. It is the abdication of reason for the comfort of numbers.
But, okay, let me push back on this a little bit.
Sure.
Because mob mentality and stampedes, they imply a lot of noise.
Sure.
It implies high emotion, adrenaline, panic. But if you're listening to this on your commute right now, ask yourself, when is the last time you were in an actual, literal screaming mob?
Probably never.
Right? Probably never. Conformity in our daily lives is rarely that cinematic. It's usually, well, incredibly boring.
That is a crucial distinction. The panic of the herd is only one flavor of conformity.
Right.
The material we're analyzing provides a brilliant linguistic counterpoint for the quiet, everyday surrender. And that is the idiom following suit.
This is such a great phrase because it strips away the adrenaline and looks at the pure structural mechanics of group behavior.
Yeah, it really does.
If you think about traditional card games like bridge or spades, you had the 4 suits, right? Hearts, diamonds, clubs, spades. The fundamental rule of these games is that if the first player lays down a card from the heart suit, every other player around the table is structurally obligated to play a heart as well if they have one in their hand.
You are bound by the precedent set by the leader. You're literally following their suit.
Exactly. And idiomatically, when we say someone is following suit in human behavior, we mean they are conforming to the actions of the person who went before them.
Simply because it's the safest path of least resistance option.
Yeah. There's no screaming. There's no stampede. You're just sitting in a quiet, air-conditioned room, falling in line.
It's social camouflage.
Ooh, social camouflage. I like that.
Let's look at a corporate boardroom example. The CEO calls a massive all-hands meeting. Revenue is down.
Okay, classic scenario.
Right. The CEO steps up to the podium and announces, look, times are tough, so to show solidarity with the company, I am voluntarily taking a 10% pay cut this year.
Wow, okay.
Now look at the other executives sitting in the front row. What do?
Oh, they immediately follow suit.
Exactly.
Within 24 hours, every single VP has sent an email offering to take a pay cut.
But let's look at the why.
Yeah.
Did every single vice president go home, sit at their kitchen table, look at their family's budget, and rationally decide that a 10% reduction in income was the optimal financial strategy for their personal life?
Of course not.
No.
They did it because the CEO played a heart.
Exactly. The environment was set. If you are the one executive in that room who decides to play a diamond, if you stand up and say, actually, I've hit all my KPIs, my department is profitable, I'm keeping my full salary, what happens to you?
Oh, you become visible.
Yes.
And like you said earlier, in the wild, visibility is vulnerability. If you don't follow suit, you aren't just making a financial decision, you're making a massive social declaration that you are not part of the group.
And we see this macroeconomically as well, A massive market leader in the retail space suddenly slashes their prices by 15%. They can afford to take the loss to gain market share. All the smaller competitors in the space don't even have to hold a meeting about it.
They just follow suit.
They lower their prices, even if it bankrupts them, because the rules of the table have changed, and nonconformity means instant death.
So whether we are stampeding with the herd or quietly following suit in a meeting, our initial surrender to the group is almost always a survival tactic.
Yes, exactly.
We are suppressing our individuality to stay safe. But, survival is a short-term game. Here is the question that fascinates me. What happens to the human psyche when you survive inside that group for too long?
That is where the architecture of the group turns deeply corrosive.
Yeah.
Because following suit might start as a conscious, temporary choice. You tell yourself, I'll just nod along in this meeting today, but I'm still my own person.
Right, I'm just playing the game.
Exactly. But if you do that every single day for 5, 10, 20 years, that biological instinct to blend in hardens into a permanent structural reality.
Right. Which takes us out of the biological metaphors of the savannah and drops us right into the smoke and steel of the Industrial Revolution.
Yes.
We are looking at the mechanization of the self, and the definitive English idiom for this psychological state is feeling like a cog in the machine.
It is arguably one of the most brilliant and simultaneously one of the most devastating metaphors in our language.
It really is depressing.
It is. And to really feel the weight of it, you have to visualize the scale of the machinery of the 1800s.
Well, you know exactly what a cog is. It's just a gear. A circular piece of shaped metal with teeth on the outside.
Right. But imagine a massive steam-powered textile loom or a giant factory engine. There are thousands of these identical cogs interlocking inside the dark belly of this machine.
Yeah.
What is the existential reality of being one of those cogs? Number one, you have no brain. You make absolutely no decisions.
Forever.
Number 2, you have no identity. You look exactly like the cog to your left and the cog to your right.
And number 3, which I think is the most crushing. You have no inherent purpose other than to blindly, violently spin whenever the giant machine forces you to spin.
Exactly.
You don't get to choose when you start. You don't choose when you stop. You don't even get to see what the machine is producing at the end of the assembly line.
You are entirely divorced from the meaning of your own labor. And the final brutal truth of the cog is its ultimate replaceability.
Right.
If the machine is running too fast and one of your metal teeth snaps off, what happens?
Nothing.
The machine doesn't mourn you. It doesn't adjust its speed to accommodate your injury. A technician just halts the engine for a fraction of a second, reaches in, yanks out the broken cog, drops a brand new, perfectly identical metal cog into your slot, and the machine roars back to life.
Oh, wow. So when a person says, I'm just a cog in the machine at my company, they aren't just complaining about being busy.
No, not at all.
They are expressing a profound existential loss of agency. It represents the pinnacle of insignificance. It's the realization that your unique talents, your creativity, your distinct personality, quirks, absolutely none of it matters to the wider, unfeeling organization.
It's a complete erasure of the self. Think of the classic modern example.
Okay.
A brilliant young graduate gets hired at a massive, prestigious global accounting firm or a tech conglomerate.
Mm-hmm.
From the outside, it is the dream.
Oh, yeah, the salary's incredible.
The benefits are flawless, their parents are thrilled, but internally, they are suffocating.
Because they are doing incredibly niche, repetitive tasks for 60 hours a week, and they realize that if they got hit by a bus tomorrow, a recruiter would have a new graduate in their desk chair by Thursday.
Exactly. And the psychological weight of that realization is why you see people walk away from multi-million-dollar career tracks.
Yeah, you hear those stories all the time.
They quit to start a tiny bakery, or they go work for a small nonprofit where they barely make rent, simply because they are desperate to do work where their individual presence actually alters the outcome.
Right.
They want to be the engine or at least the driver rather than a replaceable piece of metal.
What always strikes me about corporate culture is how they try to spin this. You hear managers say, we are a well-oiled machine here, as if that's a compliment.
Right, like it's a good thing.
But when you break it down to the level of the individual cog, the bleakness is overwhelming. You aren't the machine. You don't own the output. You are just trapped inside it, grinding against the other cogs until your teeth inevitably wear down.
Is sensory deprivation for the soul. And it presents us with a massive psychological puzzle.
Which is...
If being a cog is so inherently alienating, if it strips away all your meaning, how on earth do millions of people endure it?
That is the million-dollar question.
Why doesn't every massive corporation experience a mass exodus every single morning?
Right. How do you sit in that cubicle for 30 years knowing you are just a replaceable gear?
You survive it through delusion.
Delusion.
Yes. The human mind is remarkably resilient, but it cannot tolerate a constant waking state of meaningless insignificance.
No, the cognitive dissonance is too painful.
Exactly. So to survive the machine, the mind begins to invent a narrative. It builds an architecture of delusion. You convince yourself that the massive, cold, profit-generating machine is actually magical.
Wow.
You convince yourself that the company has a noble, world-altering purpose, and that by spinning inside it, your life has profound meaning.
Which brings us to the most volatile stage of group dynamics. This is where participation morphs into fanatical, unquestioning devotion.
Yes.
And to understand this systemic behavior, we have to examine the idiom, drinking the Kool-Aid.
We have to pause here and issue a very serious historical warning, because this is not a lighthearted phrase.
No, it's really not.
The origins of this idiom are rooted in one of the darkest moments of the 20th century.
Yes, the historical data makes this very clear. The phrase drinking the Kool-Aid originates directly from the 1978 Jonestown Massacre.
A horrific event.
Jim Jones, a charismatic and deeply manipulative cult leader, moved hundreds of his followers to an isolated jungle settlement in Guyana. When his control began to slip and outside authorities closed in, he convinced, and in many cases forced, over 900 men, women, and children to blindly consume a fruit-flavored beverage that he had laced with cyanide.
It's a staggering tragedy.
Yeah.
And historically, pedants will often note it was actually a generic brand substitute, Flavor Aid, that was used.
Yeah.
But Kool-Aid was the brand name that embedded itself permanently into the public consciousness, forever linking a childhood drink to absolute fatal obedience.
I am continually shocked by the jarring dissonance of this phrase.
Me too.
You have this terrifying literal history of mass death and psychological control, and yet you will hear highly educated, well-meaning people toss it around casually in a Tuesday morning marketing meeting. Like, oh, Sarah isn't on board with the new sales strategy yet. She hasn't drunk the Kool-Aid. It's incredible how language can absorb a trauma of that magnitude and slowly sanitize it into corporate jargon.
It is the ultimate defense mechanism of language. We take the extreme, unthinkable horror and apply it to the mundane to highlight the absurdity of our own situations.
Right.
In modern English usage, when we say someone has drunk the Kool-Aid, we aren't talking about physical poison. We are talking about the willing ingestion of psychological poison.
It means you have blindly, enthusiastically swallowed a company's culture, an extreme ideology, or a bizarre hype cycle without applying a single ounce of critical thought.
You have entirely bought into the delusion that the machine is magical. Let's look at a classic Silicon Valley example.
Okay, lay it on me.
A new developer gets hired at a startup. The startup has created an app that, let's say, optimizes the delivery route for dry cleaning.
All right, pretty mundane.
It's a useful tool, makes a bit of money. But the founders are holding weekly town halls when they pace the stage, preaching this gospel that we are disrupting the fabric of society. We are elevating human consciousness through clean laundry.
And the new developer sits in the back row thinking, this is absolutely ridiculous. We route vans to pick up shirts. You people are insane.
Right. They see the machine for exactly what it is. But fast forward 12 months.
Okay.
That developer's been working 80-hour weeks. They've been to the mandatory company retreats in the woods. They've been bombarded with the propaganda on a relentless loop.
Oh, man.
The physical fatigue sets in, but more importantly, the psychological need for their exhaustion to mean something sets in.
Ah, there it is.
They can't bear the thought that they sacrificed a year of their life just for a dry cleaning routing algorithm.
So they take a sip.
They drink the entire pitcher.
Wow.
Suddenly, you meet that same developer at a dinner party, and they are aggressively lecturing everyone at the table about how the laundry app is fundamentally revolutionizing the human experience.
They've drunk the Kool-Aid.
Completely.
And the hallmark of this condition is that it becomes completely impossible to have a rational debate with them. If you look at the app's financials and say, hey, your user growth is completely flat and you're burning cash, they don't respond with data.
No, never.
They look at you like you are a heretic. They respond with ideology. They are no longer operating on logic. They are operating on pure faith in the system.
And you have to ask, why do modern organizations push the Kool-Aid so aggressively?
Yeah.
Why the ping pong tables, the extreme mission statements, the cult-like retreats? Because an organization full of people who have drunk the Kool-Aid is an organization that does not need to be managed with logic. And more importantly, it doesn't need to be managed with fair compensation.
Oh, that is sinister.
It's highly effective.
Yeah.
If you convince an employee they are on a holy crusade, you can underpay them, you can deny them weekends, you can demand unreasonable sacrifices, and they won't just accept it.
I'll ask for more.
They will thank you for the privilege of suffering for the cause.
It is the ultimate hack for leadership, which drives us right into the natural progression of this dynamic.
Right.
When that fanatical devotion stops being about the company's mission and centralizes entirely onto one human being, the group structure mutates into a cult of personality.
This is where we cross the threshold from toxic corporate culture into extreme systemic volatility.
How so?
Well, if you look at the mechanics of a normal, healthy organization, whether that's a nation state, a massive corporation, or a local charity, it is united by an external framework. It has a constitution, a set of bylaws, shared principles, or established rules.
Right. The framework is the supreme authority. If the CEO of a Fortune 500 company blatantly breaks the rules or loses $1 billion, the board of directors points to the bylaws and fires the CEO.
Exactly.
The rules are bigger than the person.
Precisely. But when a group devolves into a cult of personality, that entire framework is systematically dismantled and discarded.
Just thrown out.
The group no longer unites around shared principles. The singular unifying force becomes the obsessive, near-religious worship of one flawless, charismatic leader.
The leader becomes the Constitution. Whatever they say on any given Tuesday is the new law of gravity.
Yes, and the key defining trait of a cult of personality is the total eradication of criticism.
Right.
The leader is deemed infallible. If the company succeeds, it is attributed entirely to the solitary, godlike genius of the leader. But if the company fails or makes a catastrophic error,
It's never their fault.
it is never the leader's fault. It is blamed on saboteurs, jealous competitors, or a misunderstanding of the leader's complex vision.
We see this so clearly in politics. A political party might have existed for 100 years with a very specific, deeply documented platform of policies and economic principles.
Sure.
But a charismatic figure takes over, and within a few years, the party completely abandons its own history. They stop debating legislation. The entire apparatus of the party devolves into a massive cheerleading squad for this one individual.
Yeah, they just fall in line.
If the leader contradicts a core belief of the party simply rewrites its core belief that afternoon to match the leader.
The tech world is practically built on this dynamic too.
Oh, totally.
A founder creates one highly successful piece of software in their 20s, and suddenly their employees treat them as an oracle on all subjects. You see employees start dressing exactly like the founder. They mimic their cadence of speech. They adopt the founder's obscure biohacking dietary habits.
The danger, as you mentioned, is the total lack of shock absorbers. In a system governed by rules, if someone has a genuinely terrible idea, there is a mechanism, a committee, a board, a voting process designed to stop it.
Right, there are brakes on the car.
But in a cult of personality, if the infallible leader wakes up and says, "We are going to invest all our capital into building a submarine out of glass," nobody is allowed to say, "That's a terrible idea, the pressure will crush it."
No way.
The cogs just spin as fast as they can, drinking the Kool-Aid, and they start building the glass submarine.
Which brings us to the inevitable, terrifying reckoning. Because no matter how deeply a group isolates itself in delusion, no matter how fiercely they worship their leader, we all still live in the real world.
Right, gravity still works.
And the real world does not care about your Kool-Aid. Physics exists, markets crash, products fail, and infallible leaders inevitably make catastrophic, undeniable mistakes.
Okay, so here's the ultimate logical puzzle of group dynamics. The glass submarine implodes. The political campaign loses in a landslide. The startup burns through $1 billion of venture capital and has zero revenue.
Yeah.
The leader has clearly made a massive error, but the group has spent years establishing the ironclad rule that the leader is perfect. And the group has entirely bought into the delusion that the machine itself is righteous.
Exactly.
So the system has failed, but the system cannot be blamed. Who takes the fall?
When a massive organization needs to protect its own ego, and desperately needs to insulate its flawless leader from consequence, it engages in the oldest, darkest sociological mechanism in human history. It finds a target. It creates a scapegoat.
The scapegoat. This is perhaps one of the most vivid, visceral metaphors in the English language.
It really is.
And the historical data takes us thousands of years into the past to understand it, specifically to the book of Leviticus in the ancient Hebrew Bible.
The psychology behind this ancient ritual maps perfectly onto modern corporate behavior.
It is uncanny.
In the community of ancient Israelites, there was a profound understanding of collective guilt. Sins, crimes, and moral failures would accumulate in the village over the year, creating a heavy psychological burden. The community needed a mechanism to physically remove that invisible guilt so they could feel clean again.
So they devised a ritual.
Exactly. On the Day of Atonement, the high priest would take 2 live goats. One goat was sacrificed on the altar, but the second goat, the scapegoat, was kept alive and brought to the center of the community.
I want to focus on the sensory details of this because it's so raw. The high priest would step forward and physically press both of his hands down onto the head of this innocent living animal.
And through that intensely physical, symbolic action, the priest would recite the rebellions, the wickedness, and the sins of the entire population.
Wow.
He was transferring the collective corruption of thousands of people onto the shoulders of one animal.
They didn't slaughter it there, though.
No. That wouldn't remove the sin from the camp. They had to cast it out. They would drive the goat out of the village, violently chasing it away into the deep, barren wilderness of the desert.
Just sending it away to die.
The goat, carrying the unbearable weight of the community's guilt, would wander off alone to suffer and inevitably die of exposure or predators. And as the people watched it disappear over the horizon into the dust, they felt a massive physiological release. They felt cleansed.
They didn't have to look in the mirror and face their own failures anymore because their failures were currently wandering in the desert on the back of a goat.
Exactly.
When you map that ancient blood-soaked ritual onto the fluorescent lighting of a modern corporate press conference, it is genuinely chilling. The mechanics haven't changed in 3,000 years.
Not one bit. In modern sociology, a scapegoat is an individual, or often a marginalized minority group, who is unfairly targeted, disproportionately punished and forced to take sole responsibility for the wider group's systemic to deep-rooted failures.
It's a defense mechanism.
It is the mechanism we use to avoid dismantling a corrupt system.
Think about a massive global financial crash. You have decades of aggressive deregulation. You have deeply greedy executives at the very top of the banking system designing toxic financial instruments.
The whole system is rotten.
The entire culture of Wall Street is fundamentally corrupt and unstable. The machine itself is broken. But when the crash finally happens and trillions of dollars evaporate, the executives cannot step up to the microphone and say, "We built a fraudulent system," because that would mean they lose their wealth, their power, and possibly go to prison.
The structure must be preserved at all costs.
Yeah.
So what do the executives do?
They find the goat.
They comb through the wreckage, and they find some 26-year-old mid-level trader in the London office who made one unauthorized tweak to a trading algorithm, and they drag him out in front of the global media.
The executives and the media metaphorically press their hands onto his head. They hold a press conference and say, "Behold, here is the rogue trader.
Right, here's a villain.
Here's the bad apple who ruined our beautiful, perfect financial system. We are shocked by his deceitful behavior."
They fire him, they sue him into bankruptcy, they plaster his face on the cover of every newspaper, and maybe they even send him to a federal penitentiary.
They drive him into the desert.
And what happens the next day?
They feel cleansed.
The executives feel cleansed. The politicians who deregulated the market feel cleansed. The public feels a brief, satisfying hit of dopamine because justice was supposedly served.
But nothing actually changes.
And the massive corrupt machine goes right back to functioning exactly as it did before, entirely unchanged, having sacrificed one heavily manipulated individual to protect the power structure.
We see this on a micro level in middle management constantly.
Oh, all the time.
Think about a marketing department. The executive board forces the design team to build a terrible, overpriced product that absolutely nobody wants. The executives then hand this garbage product to the marketing director and say, "Sell 1 million units."
Impossible task.
Naturally, the launch is a catastrophic failure. Do the executives sit in the boardroom and say, "Wow, our product design was fundamentally flawed"?
Never.
No. They send out a company-wide email saying, "Unfortunately, the marketing director failed to execute the vision. The marketing director is fired, their career takes a hit, and the executives keep their massive bonuses. The goat is cast out."
It is a breathtakingly cruel sociological tool.
But wait, this makes me wonder about the aftermath. We've talked about what happens to the village. They feel cleansed and go back to business. But what is the experience of the goat?
Yeah, that's the real tragedy.
Or, taking it a step further, what happens if the truth actually does come out? What happens when that charismatic, godlike leader of the cult of personality is finally caught, the Kool-Aid wears off, and the entire group turns on them? What is the actual social outcome for a person who is permanently, publicly cast out of the group?
This is the final, terminal stage of our journey through group dynamics.
Okay.
When someone is permanently exiled from the safety and protection of the group, they suffer a catastrophic annihilation of status. In English, this phenomenon is captured perfectly by the idiom, "a fall from grace."
It is such a heavy cinematic phrase, a fall from grace. Just saying, it feels like you're reading a Shakespearean tragedy.
It does.
And the linguistic data shows us that it has these grand overlapping origins in both theology and aristocratic history.
To grasp the sheer violence of this phrase, you have to understand what grace meant to the people who coined the term.
Okay, let's unpack that.
In classical theology, grace is the unmerited divine favor of God. To live in a state of grace means you are eternally protected, you are loved, and you are guaranteed a place in heaven.
You are safe from the fires of the world.
Right. And if we look at the aristocratic context, grace meant being in the high favor of the king or queen.
Ah, social grace.
If you were in their good graces, you lived physically inside the royal court. You had titles, immense wealth, guards at your door, and absolute respect from everyone beneath you.
You had the ultimate social armor. You were untouchable.
But if you offended the king or committed a grave heresy, the punishment wasn't just a demotion. You didn't just lose a paycheck.
Yeah.
You lost your entire reality. You were cast out of heaven. You were physically expelled from the royal court, stripped of your titles, your lands were seized, and your protection vanished.
Everything is just gone.
The sheer vertical drop plummeting from the very pinnacle of the social hierarchy to the absolute freezing bottom is what makes it a fall.
So idiomatically, in the modern world, a fall from grace isn't getting a bad performance review.
Not at all.
It is a sudden, dramatic, and intensely public loss of social status, respect, and prestige. It's when you go from being the most beloved, powerful person in the room, maybe even the untouchable leader of a cult of personality, to being a total radioactive social outcast.
The visibility of the fall is the key component.
Right.
A true fall from grace requires an audience. The crowd that once worshipped you must be present to watch you hit the ground. Think about the classic examples of our era.
Like the tech industry?
Exactly. You have a visionary CEO. He built a tech empire from his garage. His face is on the cover of magazines. When he speaks at conferences, people hang on his every word as if he is a prophet.
The Kool-Aid is flowing freely.
But then an investigative journalist uncovers a massive embezzlement scandal or widespread fraud in the core technology. The illusion shatters. The board of directors who used to worship him instantly turn on him to protect the company.
And the reversal is whiplash-inducing.
It happens overnight.
1 week, he is ringing the opening bell at the stock exchange. The next week, his assets are frozen, his former friends refuse to take his calls, his legacy is erased from the company website, and he is sitting quietly in a federal courtroom.
He is permanently banned from the industry.
That is a spectacular textbook fall from grace.
Or look at the world of elite sports. You have a legendary athlete. They are idolized by millions of children. They have $100 million sneaker deals. They are breaking decades-old records.
They're immortal.
And then a drug test comes back, positive for performance-enhancing steroids, revealing a massive, years-long cheating conspiracy.
The public, who essentially functioned as a cult of personality, turns on them with a viciousness that is almost hard to watch.
It's brutal.
All of their records are retroactively wiped out with an asterisk. They are stripped of their Olympic medals. The sponsors drop them in a matter of hours. They go from being an immortal hero to a cultural punchline overnight. It is a profound cinematic isolation.
It's the ultimate punishment the herd can inflict.
It really is an incredible, albeit dark, narrative arc. When you pull back and look at the journey we've taken through these concepts today, the connective tissue is just fascinating. We started on the primal savanna, watching the individual logic evaporate in the panicked rush of herd mentality.
We watch the individual quietly submit to the rules of the boardroom, choosing safety by following suit.
We felt the crushing existential insignificance of being reduced to a replaceable cog in the machine.
We explored the terrifying psychological coping mechanisms required to survive that machine, willingly drinking the Kool-Aid and surrendering all critical thought to a cult of personality.
And finally, we witnessed the brutal, self-correcting violence of the group loading its sins onto an innocent scapegoat and watching the mighty plummet in a spectacular fall from grace.
It is the complete, unbroken sociological life cycle of human conformity.
And for you listening, whether you're walking your dog or driving to work, this is exactly why we do these deep dives into language. Understanding these phrases isn't about padding your vocabulary for an English exam.
Definitely not.
It is about building an essential, real-world toolkit. You are constructing a lens through which you can analyze history, navigate treacherous corporate politics, and decode the invisible forces shaping the behavior of your friends, your family, and your colleagues. When you internalize these concepts, you essentially become a master sociologist of your own life.
Absolutely. Because when you can name the dynamic, you can rob it of its invisible power.
Exactly.
When you feel the biological pull of the herd urging you to make a panic decision, you can name it, take a breath, and consciously choose to stand your ground. When you recognize that a manager is pouring the Kool-Aid and asking for blind devotion, you can smile, politely decline the cup, and protect your own mind.
Knowledge, in this context, is the ultimate defense mechanism.
It really is.
So, to that end, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over today. I want you to apply this directly to your own life. Think back over your career. Have you ever found yourself in a role where you suddenly woke up and realized, oh my God, I am just a cog in the machine here? You felt your unique identity slipping away into the bureaucracy. What was the specific breaking point for you? And more importantly, what specific, terrifying action did you have to take to pull yourself out of the gears and regain your independent identity?
And if you want to apply this lens to the broader culture, look at the news this week. Pick a famous historical or pop culture figure who recently experienced a massive, highly public fall from grace.
Ooh, good homework.
Don't just look at the mistake they made. Analyze the architecture of the crowd around them. What were the societal mechanics that forced them out of the royal court? Did the group actually use them as a scapegoat to cover up a much larger systemic rot? Or was it the inevitable catastrophic collapse of a cult of personality?
Once you start looking for the goats and the cogs, it completely changes how you read the news, doesn't it? Well, that is all the time we have for today's exploration. We want to thank you so much for joining us on this intensely psychological deep dive into the language of the crowd.
Keep practicing your critical thinking. Keep questioning the systems you participate in. And remember that there is always profound meaning hiding just beneath the surface of the words we use every day.
And whatever you do, remember, when you see a room full of brilliant, rational people suddenly start running blindly with the herd, make sure you check the ingredients before you take a sip from their cup. Never drink the Kool-Aid. Catch you on the next deep dive.